Hello guys, so this video is a pre-video before to start the real one, because when I finished to edit and to do everything on the video, I noticed that there is some dark moments with body images, crime scene and everything, and it can hurt the most sensitive people around us. And just to warn you before you're going to watch it, I just want to tell you that I have added some warning symbols that will be a bit of everywhere on the screen just before, 3 seconds before an image will be displayed, and maybe with a noise or something like this. And at the end, another noise to tell you, okay, you can open your eyes again. So I hope you're going to enjoy it, and good luck with that. Bye bye. The Black Dahlia murder case, also known as the Elizabeth Church murder case, is one of the most famous and fascinating cases in the criminal history of Hollywood and Los Angeles. Why did it stay in the public eye for so long, and what really happened? On the morning of January 15, 1947, at 8:40 a.m., Betty Bersinger was walking with her little daughter down an unfinished street in a construction zone in California's Leimert Park neighborhood, when she spotted what she thought was the two halves of a dressmaker's mannequin. Her deep blue eyes gazed skyward. A wounded smile marked her face. She was cold, alone and defenseless. This was how she presented herself to the world: dead, naked and horribly mutilated. Elizabeth Short, or Bess, as her family called her, 22 years old, was a young woman who had come to Los Angeles with the dream of becoming an actress. Her body had been cut in half to perfection. There was not a drop of blood, and the body was laid out in an unusually macabre manner. After this horrible event, over 50 suspects were questioned, both men and women, some of whom even confessed to the crime, but the murder was never solved, and the mystique of the case grew with time. It soon became known as the Black Dahlia in reference to the film The Blue Dahlia, with Veronica Lake, released the previous year, and because Bess had black hair. According to the investigators and forensic pathologists, only an expert could have left the body as it was. Specifically, she had undergone a hemicorporectomy. In short, this complicated word simply means that her body had been cut in two at the lumbar spine, the only part that can be cut without breaking the bone. Unfortunately, that's not all. Before her death, she was probably forced to eat excrement and gagged for at least 3 days, during which time she was relentlessly tortured. The woman's body was then mutilated, her intestines removed, and her torso, head and arms found on one side, and her pelvis and legs on the other. Worst of all, her mouth had been opened in a horrible grimace from the corners to the ears, the horrible cut known as the Glasgow grin, and towards the Joker smile in Batman. Her body was then washed up and dumped. This heinous act has long haunted the LAPD and the city's residents, who have seen sales of newspapers and books on the subject skyrocket. Janice Knowlton is a former professional singer and PR company owner who made a name for herself with her claims linked to the Black Dahlia murder case. At the age of 10, she lived in Westminster, where Elizabeth Short's mutilated body was discovered in 1947. Decades later, Janice claimed that repressed memories revealed that her father, George Knowlton, was Elizabeth Short's murderer. Her detailed accusations, including witnessing her father's violent acts, were published in a controversial 1995 book, Daddy Was a Black Dahlia Killer. Despite sustained media attention and appearances on popular TV shows such as Larry King Live, law enforcement and much of the public remained skeptical of his claims. Westminster police found no evidence to support her story, and family members openly disputed her claims, straining family relations. Janice's claims contributed to the mystery and speculation surrounding the Black Dahlia case, but did not lead to a legal resolution. Psychiatrists found her story plausible due to the nature of repressed memories and post-traumatic stress disorder, but no corroborating evidence validated her claims. Her vivid descriptions in her book and subsequent commentary kept her in touch with the case, often living long. Rambling messages for journalists researching the Black Dahlia. Tragically, Norton's final years were overshadowed by personal struggles with depression and anxiety, exacerbated by extensive hormones treatments. She died in 2004, probably of an accidental overdose. Norton's life was a mixture of artistic potential and deep psychological turmoil, leaving a complex and controversial legacy in the annals of one of America's most infamous unsolved crimes. But it wasn't until the turn of the century that the case finally came to light. In 1999, Steve Odell, a police officer, was going through his recently deceased father, George's belongings when he came across something astonishing. Two photographs of a woman who bore an uncanny resemblance to the Black Dahlia. Suddenly, he begins to recall family history with his father. When he was younger, his father had studied medicine in the 1930s, finding some of his lectures. Steve, the son, compares them to the letters the killer had sent to the press and police. The latter are eerily similar to his father's, and in 1949, 2 years after the murder, his daughter, Steve's own sister, had denounced her father, George, for sexual abuse. As Steve investigates further, the threads begin to intertwine. Is this person he called Dad the murderer? Although Steve Odell has already detailed his investigation in the book The Avenger of the Black Dahlia, a murder genius. A report in The Guardian has brought the case back into the news, and even more surprisingly, Steve Odell himself has decided to put it back in the media spotlight. If his father's story is brutal, Steve Odell's is perhaps even more so in some ways, as he has devoted his whole life to trying to clear not really, let's say, but rather convict his father of one of the most horrific crimes in 20th century history. After all, Steve Odell was a policeman, so he decided to do his duty until it became a personal matter for him. For more than 15 years, he devoted himself to gathering every possible clue so that there could be no doubt that the man who murdered Elizabeth Short was George Odell. Above all, to rule out other theories, such as that of a woman, Janice Norton, you know, the one we've just mentioned earlier, who claimed in her own book that was the Black Dahlia killer, that her father was a real killer. A version that time has shown was probably nothing more than an excuse to sell a few books, or perhaps the product of a sick mind that believed in its own invention. But Odell was methodical. First, he requested access to the files the FBI had gathered on his father. He sent the photos found in his father's belongings to facial recognition experts and the texts to graphologists, and the results were inconclusive, which didn't stop him, which is to say that he was relentless in his efforts to prove that his father was a murderer. A terrible son, let's say, but a relentless investigator. It'd have been better luck if he could find a receipt for 10 bags of cement of the same size and brand as was found near Short's body, presumably for transporting the body. The difficulties are not small. After all, most of the witnesses are already dead and many of the clues have been missing for decades, meaning that anyone who might be a key witness is already dead. In many cases, the details of memories are gone forever. However, perseverance pays off, and Odell received a major boost in 2001 when he met Stephen Kane, an old acquaintance who worked in the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office, and who volunteered to review the documents Steve had accumulated so far. As you'd expect, the whole story isn't written in the hundreds of pages of Steve Odell's 2003 book. Unsurprisingly, the book's publication has brought new evidence to light and attracted the interest of other witnesses. Such was the case of Steve Lopez, a Los Angeles columnist who, while writing an article on the subject, requested information from the prosecutor. He obtained access to a file not even known to Odell, compiled at the time by Lieutenant Frank Jamison, one of the case's principal investigators. Inside was the information everyone was looking for. confirmation that the police had processed 6 names, including that of George Odell. What's more, he also collected a statement from the investigator's father on February 19, 1950, via his taped phone while his house was being spied on, and here's what he said.
When I realized there was nothing I could do, I put a pillow over her head and covered her with a sheet. I took a cab. She died at 12:59. They thought something was wrong. Well, now they may have discovered the truth. I killed her.
Later, at another point, the doctor said,
If I killed the Black Dahlia, they can't prove it. They can't talk to my secretary because she's dead.
On the other hand, one of his favorite photos shows George Odell posing with one of his best friends, the photographer and artist Man Ray. Steve remembers the uncanny resemblance between his father's alleged murder and 2 of American's works, The Lovers and Minotaur. What is the Black Dahlia crime was just a masterpiece of surrealism. As for the elements that were gathered during the investigation, we are able to obtain information on 2 suspects, Norton and Odell. From what we could see, Norton's story leaves a lot of doubt about Janie's testimony about her father. I find it very hard to believe that a 10-year-old girl who witnessed such a daring act at some point in her childhood could have lived her life as if nothing had happened, and that her father's craziness would have resulted in just one terrible action in her life, and that she would have had a conventional life before and after the event. One of her relatives described how she had lived with the father for 16 years and could never think that George Norton could have done what his daughter accused him of. In my opinion, Janice began to develop dementia during her life and would have intermingled the information. Then, seeing all the light that was brought to her, she would have convinced herself of her father's guilt in this matter. Unfortunately, one night, she took more drugs than usual to treat her problems and died of an overdose. George Odell is a perfect culprit, but not entirely. Steve never questioned his father's guilt during his lifetime, but more than 40 years later, just after his father's death, while packing up his belongings, he discovered photos of a young woman who bore an uncanny resemblance to Elizabeth Short. He also suspected that his father's handwriting was the same as that on the letters sent to the police at the time of the murder. These 2 potential pieces of evidence were quickly disregarded. As for the police, the woman in the photo did not match Elizabeth, and the handwriting did not coincide with that on the letters. In the course of his investigation, he asked the story of the bags of cement his father had bought at the time and which were found at the scene of the crime, insisting that his father had studied medicine, which would have enabled him to carry out this operation. He also mentions that he was inspired by the artistic work of his friend, Man Ray, and to add to George Odell's twisted mind, and perhaps to seek his widow's sympathy, he mentions what he did to his sister when she was young. But now that we know all of this, his son's opinion and the evidence he's gathered, what can we objectively deduce? There is no need to talk about the photos and his father's handwriting. They have been refuted by the authorities, so let's move on. I'm not familiar with the cement market in the country at the time, but I imagine there were around dozens of suppliers. And when you are in a construction zone, there is a good chance you'll come across the same bags. I find this element a little meager. But objectively, I agree that it should be kept as the beginning of a proof, but on its own, it's not worth much. George Odell's studies in medicine and his ability to butcher a human being cleanly, if you like, I agree that this could be a relevant element to take into account. But then again, on its own, it's not very valuable. The last point, it touches and concerns his inspiration from the works of his friend, Man Ray. I'll put them on the screen for a moment so you can judge, but frankly, you'd have to look very far. I don't know about you, but I don't share his opinion at all on this point. Let's move on the other evidence found by Lopez. According to him, we have audio recordings of George Odell distinctively saying, "I killed her." If that's the case, why hasn't there been a conviction or even any mention in the report that he was the main suspect? on this last point, I'm a little puzzled to be honest. I can't give an opinion as I didn't have the opportunity to obtain these wiretaps. Now, for my final analysis of George Odell. Okay, it has been proven George Odell abused his daughter. There is no doubt he was a first-class bastard. But the question we're asking today is, was he really Elizabeth Shaw's killer? After the death of his father, Steve was cleaning out his belongings when he came across photos of a stranger. Knowing what he had done to his sister, he began to believe that his father was the murderer of the Black Dahlia. Everything began to take shape, and in a spirit of revenge, he became convinced that by gathering all possible evidence, he could destroy his father's image. Steve decided not to rest on his laurels and went on to publish his first book in 2003. But his success story never ceases, and he goes on to write a dozen books, half of which are dedicated to this case. Sometimes, when you absolutely want to believe in something, you end up convincing yourself of it. I'm certain that his father was not a healthy man and deserved many years in prison, but today we still can't confirm whether he really is the murderer in the Black Dahlia case, and the evidence gathered does not prove his guilt. So this case will remain a cold case for many years to come. What do you think about it? I had a lot of fun working on this case, even if it's not happy ending, but at least this is something like very interesting to see all the articles and videos that went around this case. So do not hesitate on my side to tell me what I could improve, what you like, you dislike, and what could improve my videos to give you a better feeling in the future. So in any case, I see you next Friday on the same channel. Bye bye!